I have long since said, since they opened for business back in 1995 with you guys remember this name, Kenny Hill, torching South Carolina, the Texas A&M quarterback, for over 500 yards. That was actually the fall of 2014, August of 2014. That was the first SEC network game. And they've done a remarkable job in terms of stocking that network to make it look first class. However, I will say for the production that they put on for SEC Media Days, I monitor that pretty closely and watch just about everything every year. They tend to go off the rails in their national coverage. They need to stick to the lane and stay in their lane covering the SEC, because they tend to wonder about and hit some points here, as DML has pointed out as well. So we're getting right there, DML. We appreciate the contribution, sir. Paul Finebaum is truly a clown. His hate is sickening. How could you disrespect another person that bad on live television when plenty of SEC programs are bad? Perfect segue, DML. Perfect segue. Let me get to some of the comments here from Finebaum on SEC Media Days today. So again, why they needed to talk about Lincoln Riley, I don't know, but here they go. We will just stick to the quotes. Quote, I think he's been a disaster. Okay, quote, let's go back 3 years. Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC. What did Lincoln Riley do? He ran away. He did not want to deal with the Southeastern Conference at OU. He took what he thought was an easier course. So he goes out to Southern Cal. He takes Caleb Williams. Good for a year, but since then, everything has gone wrong. Speaking about it as though there was one good year and then like 6 bad years. Okay. Everything since has gone wrong. Okay, next quote. I thought last year was one of the worst coaching jobs I've ever seen. Good Lord. Next quote. If I had been the athletic director at Southern Cal, I would have fired Lincoln Riley because he has yet to show, after many years as a head coach, he knows about defense. He's gone through defensive coordinators. He just simply couldn't handle it. Next quote. Now things are going to be 5 times worse in the Big Ten. That could be slightly overstated. On top of that, a number of his top players are bailing out. Final quote here. This is a guy who owned LA for about a half a minute. And quite frankly, next year at this time, I think he'll more than likely be an assistant in the NFL if he's that lucky, end quote.
So much to choose from. The 2 things that I would emphasize. One, the quote, he's gone through defensive coordinators. But hello, his problem is that he hasn't gone through defensive coordinators, that he's stuck with one coordinator way too long. So like, that's a big error right there. But the other thing, and like, I'm not gonna write about this now because frankly, people aren't reading Trojans Wire all that much. I gotta save my really good stuff for when, closer to the season, when more readers are reading my stuff. So I'm gonna save it for the print side for August. But I can say this right now on the Voice of College Football, is that we need to have a Brent Venables conversation. If we are going to have a Lincoln Riley conversation at USC, we need to have a Brent Venables conversation at Oklahoma. And Oklahoma fans, like, they are bullish on Venables, and I'm not going to criticize them for that. But what I am going to criticize from Oklahoma fans, since we're on this topic, is that like they are just so upfront in saying, oh, it was so clearly good for Oklahoma football that Lincoln Riley left. All right, I mean, can we just pick that apart for a bit? Lincoln Riley took you to 3 playoffs. Now, did he do that with what Bob Stoops left him in the cupboard? Yes, like, not arguing that, but still 3 straight playoffs, 4 straight Big 12 championships. That's a lot of achievement right there. Brent Venables hasn't yet made a playoff, hasn't yet gotten Oklahoma to the standards that Lincoln Riley achieved. And all the chips are on the middle of the table in terms of Jackson Arnold. Like Brent Venables is betting the farm that Jackson Arnold is going to be the real deal at Oklahoma. And if he's not, what then? So, just from an Oklahoma standpoint, in terms of saying how much better Brent Venables is than Lincoln Riley, all right, could be true. but hasn't yet been proved to be true. And can we at least see Brent Venables hit the ball out of the park one season before we arrive at the point where we say, oh, it's so clearly beneficial for Oklahoma that Lincoln Riley's gone? Can we at least just see Brent Venables hit a moonshot, 450-foot home run on this night of the home run derby? Can we at least see Brent Venables hit one moonshot before we start getting into that territory? So that is part of the Lincoln Riley discourse, is that if Lincoln Riley is so awful for USC, what are we saying about Brent Venables? And has Finebaum, I don't pay attention to Finebaum for a reason, but has he said anything about Brent Venables at Oklahoma? Nothing that I'm aware of. And if that is the case, now maybe he has said something about Venables, but if he hasn't, if he has not been forcefully critical of Venables, or has at least said, you know what, this is a prove it year for Venables, if Finebaum has not applied that level of scrutiny, that is just very disingenuous and playing double standards relative to Lincoln Riley and USC.
I mean, am I the only one that remembers Oklahoma going to every big bowl and getting their ass kicked? Am I? Because I mean, I keep hearing how there's no doubt that Bob Stoops had a very consistent career at Oklahoma. I love Bob Stoops, but the year that it was broken, it was freaking broken. He had his brothers at DC. He just fired. He couldn't get it going on offense, and they lost 5 games. They bring in this young guy to be their OC, and they turn it around. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a one-off. So I guess you're allowed to lose 5 games if you're Bob Stoops, and you have years and years and years of track record behind you, not just 6 years or 5 years like Riley had. But Riley came in there. I keep hearing how Bob Stoops had just set the table for him. I think that Oklahoma was struggling, and I think injecting Lincoln Riley in there, because really the only thing that was working for Oklahoma during those later Bob Stoops years wasn't their defense, Mark. It wasn't their defense. They were not winning with defense.
I agree with you to a certain extent, Tim, but I'm going to bring you back a little bit to the center. That Bob Stoops' final team went 11-2. They won a Big 12 championships. They won the Sugar Bowl.
Right, but I mean, who was his OC, and how'd they win? Did they win those with a defense, or did they win it with an offense run by Lincoln Riley, who was killing it?
Sure.
And there's a reason why Bob Stoops stepped down, because he loved Oklahoma, and they didn't want to lose a young guy that Bob Stoops felt would be an excellent coach for Oklahoma, the Oklahoma that he loved.
And
that was clear. I mean, crystal clear. And so he steps aside. He still has some years of coaching in him, because they didn't want to lose, because Riley was going to go somewhere else. He wasn't going to sit there and be the OC at Oklahoma. He was going to go off and get a head coaching job. And Stoops, being the Oklahoma man that he is, and I have mad respect for Bob Stoops. Don't ever get this twisted. He was one of the few guys that when the whole thing came out about vacating, he's like, I watched that game. I know who won that game. I mean, he got my instant respect from then on. But to sit back and make it seem like Lincoln Riley was handed the keys to a Ferrari and it was rolling and he just gravy trained it, that's the narrative. I mean, these narratives just get played out so much to me, and I hear them over and over and over again. Again, 5 losses the year before Riley got there. He comes in, cranks up the offense. They turn around a couple of years and they're rolling. I mean, that's the real narrative of it. He never got he started out with Mike Stoops, who he inherited, and then he made a poor choice with Grinch, and he hung on way too long. But like you said, Matt, it's not like he has a history of bad hires. He had one bad hire. And the thing that's really interesting about Finebaum to me is, did they talk anything about the new defense? Finebaum makes it sound like nothing changed at USC. That just goes to this narrative. And quite frankly, what this is all about? This isn't even about USC. This is about Finebaum. The man is like, he probably, I don't know the numbers, but there's other people in that space that have eclipsed him. He was the big dude. He was the SEC guy over at ESPN. Now I don't watch ESPN. Who's the guy? Pat McAfee, right? He's a new hot shot guy, taking a lot of thunder out of his stuff. You got people on the internet. You got a Josh Pate, who's a big, who does a lot in this SEC space now. Finebaum's just trying to get clicks, man. The guy's irrelevant. The guy's just bordering on an old, angry, irrelevant dude, and he's just trying to get some clicks. And so he comes out with his outrageous comments Because what's the lowest hanging fruit in the world? Take a shot at USC, and by God, take a shot at Lincoln Riley, because you're instantly going to have about 4 or 5 fan bases jumping on board and getting excited about it. So I don't think it's as much had to do with USC or Lincoln Riley as it is ESPN and Paul Finebaum realizing they're quickly becoming a dinosaur.
My general take on Paul Finebaum is somewhat close to Tim's. This is what I know about Paul Finebaum is he made a national name for himself as a local SEC guy, and he stirred up a lot of people. He would make some radical takes and outlandish takes, and he made a name for himself. And he was a big personality on radio in the South and in Alabama for a long time, and then he broke onto the national scene. And, of course, ESPN was looking for regional SEC flavor, and they grabbed the guy that was most popular on the radio in that region. And basically, I watched this show for a long time on the SEC network, and he basically just lets the callers be the entertainment of the show, and he just kind of kicks back and he provides very little analysis. But when he does exactly that. He wants to make a big splash about once a month and dive in. But day to day, it's just basically him sitting there listening to callers just going and then making like 3-word replies, and then he just moves on to the next caller. Now, the thing that I've learned from Paul Finebaum in listening to him enough is he knows extremely little about what's going on the football field. He does not major on dissecting the game, watching the game, understanding the game. He doesn't understand what's going on outside the SEC. He uses a broad brush and very general narratives about what's going on outside the SEC. What he does know is he's built a lot of contacts and relationships. He understands the sport from a macro level in terms of the structure of the sport, how it works, the power of ADs, the power of presidents, the coaching profession. He understands all that. That's what he knows, and that's an important aspect of that. He doesn't understand football and doesn't know football, doesn't know the personnel that's in the game either. Those are his strengths and weaknesses from my perspective.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I mean, I remember you bringing that up a long time ago, and then after you did, whenever I did see him, I don't watch his call-in show. I mean, I bless you if you can watch that show, but I can't watch that for 10 minutes. But it just seems like that this is the perfect example of what all three of us are talking about, and half of the chat, in the fact that he's just farming. You know, he's just engagement farming with his mouth is all he's doing. He just wants people to hop on. He wants to say something really controversial, you know. Instantly, I mean, I could say, all I have to say is Brent Venables, and there's like 4 or 5 people. We appreciate you being here, Oklahoma. And all you got to say is Brent Venables, and they're like, oh, leader of men. Oh, you know, all the catchphrases. Well, let's do some leader of wins, and then we can talk about it. It will be exciting. I think he's a great defensive. Talk about somebody who's a really good coordinator and hasn't proven that he's a head coach. That would be where is Finebaum on Venables? That's what I would say. And you know, I hear it a lot from the Oklahoma people. Well, Lincoln's a really good coordinator, but he's not much of a head coach. You know, it's only been 2 years, but Lincoln's only had 7. I mean, it's not like this leaps and bounds difference. I mean, the guy is only 40 years old, you know? So when we start jumping to the fact that he's this and this guy's that, and the worst I've ever seen after sitting there and watching the meltdown, USCJ brought up really he has a video on the same topic. You know, he's right there a front row seat for what's happened to A&M over 2 coaches, Sumlin and oh my God,
Jimbo Fisher.
Jimbo, right? I mean, he's had front row seats. He's saying this is the worst coaching job he's ever seen. I mean, come on, it's just absurd. He can't be that stupid or that obtuse.
One down season, and it was not atrocious. I know USC fans do not want to see 8-5. I do not consider the season to be atrocious. It was an 8-5 season. And again, what he did at Oklahoma can be criticized at the very highest level, but he was extremely good at Oklahoma, at the very least a B or B plus performance, and possibly better than that at Oklahoma. They went 55-10. They owned the Big 12.
Want to touch on one thing in light of what you just said, Mark. You know, Lincoln Riley's results, over the course of his full head coaching career dating back to 2017 are elite. They are clearly elite results. And some people in the chat, when we talked about Bob Stoops as part of the Brent Venables, Lincoln Riley story at Oklahoma, some people in the chat said Bob Stoops was not elite. So here's the thing. Bob Stoops was elite. Lincoln Riley has been elite as a whole. Like, and being elite doesn't mean like you won't have a bad season. Bo Schembechler had a bad season or two. Nick Saban had a bad season, 2007. You know, like every great coach has stepped in a pothole once or twice. Jim Harbaugh has, Urban Meyer has. Like, having one really, really bad season when it flies off the rails, that doesn't mean you cease to be an elite coach. It means you had a bad year. But like Lincoln Riley, 2017 through 2022, he did not lose more than 2 games in any of those 6 regular seasons. Like, that's elite performance. So one bad year does not mean you cease to be elite. Now, if you have 4 bad years, okay, different conversation. But the idea that you're not elite because you have a bad year or because you lose in playoff semifinals or playoff title games, look, the cream of the crop, like the heavyweights, the icons, the legends, okay, the Sabans, the Kirbys, the Dabos, you know, the guys who win national championships, they are elite at the highest level. But there's elite at the highest level, and then there's elite at a secondary level. Elite is not just the person who wins the national title. You know, in college basketball, if you make 3 or 4 Final Fours in a 10-year period, like, that's elite, okay? Might not have won the national title, that's elite. In baseball, if you make, like, the Houston Astros have won 2 World Series in the past 7 years, but they've made the ALCS each of the last 7 years. Like, that's elite. Even though they haven't won the championship most of the time, like, come on, you have to call the Astros as a whole, and I know Dodger fans hate this, but you have to call the Astros an elite Major League Baseball team in general. Doesn't mean that you win the title most of the time. It means you're always in that top tier, top 3, top 4. That's Lincoln Riley.
Matt,
that's
you don't
Bob
have to tell Dodger fans that, by the way. But Matt, you don't have to tell Dodger fans that.
This notion that elite is only if you win the national title or only if you win the national title 2 or 3 times. No, elite is being in the top tier of your sport, of your profession. We need to
couple things. Well, then why is it only applied to certain people like Bob Stoops? Again, I know you're not. I'm not complaining with either one of you guys. I'm saying my point I was trying to make up was about the Bob Stoops losing the big game is 2014, right? He stepped down in 2016. He had 3 shots at the playoffs. How many playoff wins did Bob Stoops, when he was rolling and handing it to Lincoln Riley, how many playoff wins did he have?
0.
Right. And outside of 2000, how many major bowl victories did Bob Stoops have? That's not my point. I'm not saying Bob. I think I was really clear. I think Bob Stoops, 17 years, 18 years he was a coach, outstanding. 2000 national champion, outstanding. Always win, consistently in being in the hunt or winning the Big 12. Amazing. There's nothing wrong with Bob Stoops. I'm trying to show, when people make this comparison, well, but Riley hasn't won a playoff game, so therefore he's not elite. That is something you guys on this panel that has brought up all the damn time. If you hold that same standard, Bob Stoops is an elite either then. So I'll take that argument.
He won a national championship.
He won a national championship, year 2, year 3, and then he went 15 years.
Yeah, he only got.
And then he went 15 years without that kind of success.
Yeah, but he didn't get to experience the entire playoff era. So let me get to a point that Tim will like, because I think it is reasonable. USC was a disaster the season before Lincoln Riley. And of course, USC was much better the next year for 2 reasons. Personnel, Caleb Williams and others brought in, but also because Lincoln Riley is 50 times better than Clay Helton. And Lincoln Riley knows how to build a winner and knows how to coach games and scheme offenses and do what he did in 2022. And I'm a big believer in the results are what matter. The bottom line results are what matter. However, the reason we're here is to bring context and understanding to those results. And I don't think USC would have been successful in the playoffs in 2022, but they were sitting at 11-1. They were playing a Pac-12 championship game, and they lost the best player in the sport, or he was basically compromised, down to 30% of himself. And there are teams that overcome those situations. Absolutely. Yes, some do, some don't, but it was a major factor in the Pac-12 championship game. And if Caleb Williams doesn't get hurt and USC somehow wins that game, we will never know what would have happened, but they were certainly outplaying Utah at the time. Then, regardless of what happens, let's say they lose by 20 points in a playoff game to whomever they would have played, the number 1 seed. They would have played Georgia, most likely. 2022, that was the Georgia, Michigan, TCU. Yeah. They might have been the 3 seed. They probably would have been the 3 seed because Michigan
played Michigan in the Fiesta.
Played Michigan. So I don't think they would have gotten rolled by Michigan. Maybe they lose a 10-point game. It's a respectable loss. It's a much different look nationally. And then they come down to 8-5, and maybe they don't go 8-5 this next season with coming off of that 2022 season as a playoff team and a Pac-12 champion.
Someone asked in the chat, is Brian Kelly an elite head coach? Yes.
We all have our own definitions of elite. He goes in that same category. If you were saying that some guys that get you to the Final Four, but then get there and be shown that he probably didn't belong to be there, then the answer would be yes, if you say that's elite. Brian Kelly has been to some playoffs, right? He was at the BCF championship game, got the doors knocked off of him, clearly was not the second best team in the country. He was a great, consistent coach that every 3 to 4 years would have it. And one thing Brian Kelly has always done and has done again at LSU is every 3 to 4 years will have an amazing offensive line. And that offensive line will drive his team to a 10, 11, 12 win season. But Brian Kelly, again, at some point, you guys, and I just want to differ from you guys on the panel. Elite coaches get you home, get you there. They're not the bridesmaid. They're not always showing up saying, hey, folks, we got here. You know what? We're one of the best. The elite coaches are like a Pete Carroll, like a Nick Saban, like a Kirby Smart, that are always there and then win and dominate and in dominant fashion show you this is absolutely the best team in the country.
So just to clarify, Tim, Lincoln Riley is not an elite coach in your estimation.
He has not shown who would say he's elite? It depends on your definition.
I'm just
hang on.
You based on your definition.
I want to clarify. At this point, he's not.
Okay.
But he's only 40. He's only coached 7 years.
We'll
come back in 20 years. We'll
put Ryan Day in the same bucket.
Yeah, Brian Day's not either. But he was a field goal away, but he didn't take it home. So
you could actually make a lot more conditions for Ryan Day than Lincoln Riley because of what you just mentioned. Plus, he's coached a few seasons less. But anyway, so he's not elite. So
talk about taking over a program. But go ahead.
Well, yeah. If you can't win there, I don't know where you're going to win. But anyway, so there are 2 elite coaches in college football right now. Matt Brown gets the lifetime membership for what happened 19 years ago, I guess.
No. See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I said. Bob Stoops won like it's year 2 or year 3, right? And then never came back to the mountaintop after that.
Sure.
And went on for 15 more years and just had very, very good and great teams, but never had that dominant team that just said, we are the best team in the country. In 15 years, he was unable to do that. Those are elite coaches. Elite coaches to me are the guys that take you and have the best team in the country, and everyone goes, yeah.
I'm just clarifying, Tim.
All right.
There are 2 elite coaches because they've won recent national championships, Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney, and then Mac Brown, whatever you want to do with him. He's got a national championship. Those are the only 3.
Well, no, I don't include Mac Brown there. I don't think just because you win, like if, for instance, if Gus Malzahn, moves his way back up to the Power 5, are we going to call him an elite coach? Because are we doing that? Are we going to say that Ed Ogeron's an elite coach because he has a national champ? No, I'm talking about a coach who's shown that they're good, they're win like a Bob Stoops, like a Lincoln Riley, but then and like a win like a Brian Kelly. But then you go that next level and you dominate the sport for 2 or 3. You have little mini dynasties or dynasties. Those are when I say elite, because how do we mark it up? What's the difference between a John Robinson and a John McKay at USC? What's the difference?
If we go Matt's direction, which I tend to lean a little further in Matt's direction, those are all-time greats. Woody Hayes, Bear Bryant, Pete Carroll, they're all-time greats. John McKay.
They're icons. They're the transcendent guys, but we have to allow for
Pete Carroll.
Like in the pyramid of elite. Yes, Pete Carroll is a transcendent. Like no question about it. Home run hitter. But like there are also great at that second tier. An example that Mark
Let's call him great
might identify with. Jackie Sherrill. Jackie Sherrill, elite head coach in his time. Like he spins off 3 or 4 11 win seasons at Pitt. Not an easy thing to do. Not something that's been readily historically replicated there. And then he goes to Texas A&M and wins a bunch of Southwest Conference championships. He smokes a couple really great teams. Notre Dame and Auburn in Cotton Bowls. Like for a decade, he was an elite coach. And he belongs to the College Football Hall of Fame. He's not in there because of the stupid policies. Like you have to have a 600 winning percentage. Yeah, like that's why Pete Carroll's not in the Hall of Fame. But like for a decade, he was as good a coach as anyone in college football. So to me, that's an elite coach. He didn't win national titles, but he was the best in his profession. Like he was one of like the 4 or 5 best coaches in his sport for a decade. But you can do that and not win national championships. So we have to allow for elite in that context, not just the skull crushers, the Sabans, the Kirbys, the Dabos.
I think we're just having a semantical argument. What I call elite, you guys call the all-time greats. What you guys call elite, I call great. I mean, we just have different nomenclature for this stuff. We're all saying the same thing. Like there's this level that's just the top of the crust. I call that elite. You call that the all-time great. There's guys that like have these mini runs, they dominate, but they don't just ever quite get there, or they're good coaches over their career, but they have a great moment. I call those guys great coaches, and then go down from there. We're just calling them different names. I think we're saying the same thing. We're just calling them different names. Really.
I don't like it. You hit close to home with Jackie Sherrill. Jackie Sherrill once asked me to speak to his team at Mississippi State in front of the football team. On how to address the media and speak to the media. And it was funny because before he introduced me, he said, because we know you're going to be getting in trouble. And, his program was running amok and he didn't know what his players were out doing, but he just wanted to make sure that they represented themselves well in front of the media. But he was a character, no doubt about that. And he elevated Mississippi State. They had been winning 3 games a year, and he gets there and Mississippi State went to the SEC championship game with Jackie Sherrill.
And like this is the year for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss to get to Atlanta. Ole Miss never been to Atlanta. This is the year for Ole Miss, the only long-standing SEC West member school to never be in the SEC championship game. So if Lane can't do it this year, when is he ever going to do it? And it does magnify Jackie taking MSU to the title game in that 1998 season against Peerless Price and T. Martin and the rest of those Tennessee Vols.
And they had a lead with about 10 minutes left in that game. So Matt, we'll move on from Jackie Sherrill certainly, but we got our buddy Brad _405. Thank you so much for the contribution, Brad. We appreciate you, Tim. #Boomer Sooner.
Yeah, I'm sure that's dripping with sarcasm, but we appreciate you being here, Brad. And I'll say, listen, there are pictures of me as a little child. Remember my favorite picture of me being really little is I have a Rams helmet on and I've got a Billy Sims t-shirt on. Now that's a Detroit Lions Billy Sims jersey, but I knew about Billy Sims. And so, I mean, people think I hate Oklahoma are completely wrong. I mean, Barry Switzer, that guy, I'm not sure, Mark, you might like the Cowboy part of him. I didn't like that part of him. I was still really into the Rams back then. But I mean,
days. Yeah.
But But I will tell you, Barry Switzer as a college football coach, that's an elite guy. If you want to talk about, elite, there's some. So I literally, I began to dislike parts of the Oklahoma fan base because of the way they acted after the Lincoln Riley thing. I think it was a really unfair shots and not really good look for a fan base. But overall, if you were to ask me, in the Big 12, who was my favorite team, even it would have been probably one of two, either Oklahoma State or Oklahoma. Those would have been my two favorite teams in the Big 12. But yeah, recent events changed that quite a bit. But I also know there's a lot of great fans. I've met a number, because a lot of fans call on the call-in show, you guys, and I forget to turn it off. And so I'll get a call like the next day in the middle afternoon, and it'll be someone calling because it's forwarded through my cell phone. And I've talked to a number of Oklahoma fans, and I mean, they're not happy with Lincoln Riley, but they can hold a conversation. I wish we could hear from more of them.